For years, I had one goal, to buy a house. But when I finally bought it and returned from a business trip, I was stunned to find Karen renting it out to yet another family. And for a moment, I couldn't believe my eyes. Hey, just before we jump into the crazy details, do us a quick favor. Drop a comment below letting us know which city you're watching from. It might sound small, but it really boosts our channel and helps more people discover these stories. And while you're at it, smash that like button and subscribe to stay up to date on all the insane HOA, Karen, and neighborhood saga videos we've got coming. For years, I had one goal, to buy a house. My ex-wife and I had once dreamed of it together, but after the divorce, that dream fell to me alone. I wasn't someone who came from money, and the idea of owning a home felt like a distant fantasy. But I was determined to make it happen. I worked long hours at a warehouse job, sometimes taking on extra shifts just to save every penny I could. But once I had that money saved, I realized that buying the house wasn't the end of the story. I'd have to keep working to maintain it, and the reality of being a homeowner, especially living alone, set in. That's when the opportunity came, an overseas contract, a 6-month job in a construction project in Dubai, supervising the setup of a massive logistics center. It wasn't easy work, but the pay was more than enough to cover what I needed to finish off the house and give myself a little cushion. I agreed, thinking of it as a temporary sacrifice. I'd leave for 6 months, earn a solid income, and return to a fully settled home. It seemed simple, but 6 months turned into a bit more than that. I stayed for 7, then 8 months, each day spent working, thinking of my home waiting for me. And when I finally returned, ready to settle in, the last thing I expected was to see what I saw. 8 months of hard work overseas, and finally, I was back. The nights of exhaustion in Dubai, where the scorching heat sapped the energy out of me, had been worth it. I had imagined coming home, throwing my bags onto the floor and collapsing onto my old leather couch with the comforting creak that no one else but me knew how to appreciate. But when I turned onto my street, something didn't feel right. The first thing I noticed was the yard. It wasn't the patchy, overgrown mess I had left behind. No, this yard looked like it had been pulled from a home improvement magazine. The grass was trimmed, flower beds bloomed along the walkway, and a shiny wind chime hung from the porch, gently singing in the breeze. I parked in the driveway, my heart pounding as I stared at the unfamiliar scene. My mailbox had been repainted, the welcome mat was new, and there were kids' toys scattered across the front yard. I didn't have kids. I didn't even have a dog. Something was wrong, very wrong. I stepped out of the car and approached the house cautiously. As I reached the front porch, the sound of children's laughter drifted through the open window. My fingers tightened around the door handle as I inserted my key and turned. The lock clicked, but when I pushed the door open, it felt like I had walked into another life. The walls had been painted a soft cream color, and new furniture filled the living room. My old couch, the one I had spent years lying on, was gone. In its place was a sleek sectional surrounded by neatly arranged throw pillows. A large TV hung on the wall, and framed family photos of strangers decorated the shelves where my books used to be. I stood frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. This was my house, but it wasn't. I heard footsteps coming from the kitchen. A woman appeared in the doorway, holding a mixing bowl and a wooden spoon. She was in her mid-30s, wearing an apron with flour smeared on her hands. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. I clenched my fist. "I think I should be asking you that. What are you doing in my house?" Her brows furrowed. "Your house? We've been renting this place for months." My stomach twisted. "Renting? From who?" She placed the bowl down on the counter and wiped her hands on her apron. "A woman named Karen. She's the landlord. We signed a lease and everything." I could barely breathe. Karen. I didn't know any Karen, and I certainly hadn't rented out my house. "Show me the lease," I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. The woman hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, but she nodded and disappeared down the hall. She returned with a folder and handed it to me. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the papers. The lease agreement was real, printed, signed, and dated. Karen's name was listed as the property owner, along with her contact information. "I don't understand," the woman said softly. "Is there a problem?" "There's a big problem," I said, shoving the papers back into the folder. "You've been scammed. Karen isn't the owner of this house. I am." Her face paled. "What?" "But she showed us documents, proof of ownership. We've been paying her rent every month." I pulled out my phone and called the real estate agency that had helped me purchase the house. They had no record of Karen. She hadn't listed the property through them. I opened the lease again and scanned it until I found her phone number. Without thinking, I dialed it. It rang twice before a woman answered, her voice annoyingly cheerful. "Hello?" "Karen," I said, my voice cold. "This is the owner of the house you've been illegally renting out. Look, it's not what you think. The house was empty, and I thought—" "You thought you'd steal it," I cut her off. "And you thought I wouldn't notice." "I was doing you a favor," she snapped. "The house would have sat empty and gathered dust. I kept it in good condition." I clenched my jaw so tightly it hurt. "By making money off something you don't own? I'm reporting you to the police. You'd better have a good lawyer." She hung up before I could say more. I stood there, gripping the phone, seething. I had worked too hard for this house to let someone like Karen profit off it. Tension was thick in the air when there was a knock at the front door. It was sharp and deliberate, as if the person on the other side knew exactly what they were doing and had no plans to leave until they were heard. I pulled the door open, and there she was, Karen, late 30s, sharply dressed, with a phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. Her eyes scanned me, not with fear, but with something close to disdain. "You must be the owner," she said, her voice calm, almost smug. "You're damn right I am," I snapped, "and you've got a lot to explain." Karen crossed her arms, leaning slightly against the doorframe as if she owned the place. "Before you get worked up, you should understand that this isn't as simple as you think. The HOA guidelines are clear. Vacant properties can be temporarily leased if it's in the neighborhood's best interest." I laughed bitterly. "HOA guidelines don't give you the right to rent out a house you don't own. This is illegal, Karen." She shrugged. "I didn't see you around for months. The house was sitting here, neglected. I thought I was helping keep the neighborhood presentable." "Get off my property!" I cut her off. Karen glared at me, then turned on her heel, heading down the steps without another word. But I wasn't naive. This wasn't over. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling sharply. I wanted to drive straight to the police station and file a report, but the woman who had been renting the house appeared in the doorway to the living room. Her expression was uneasy, and she twisted the edge of her shirt in her hands. "Look, I don't want any trouble," she said softly. "Karen, she tricked us, but we didn't know. We've already paid her for this month, and with the kids, it'll take time to find somewhere else to go." I didn't blame her. She had her own mess to clean up, and I had mine. After she disappeared down the hallway, I grabbed my keys and headed outside, ready to drive to the nearest police station and file a report. But when I reached my car, I stopped dead. The tires had been slashed, deep gashes cutting through the rubber. My jaw clenched as I crouched down to inspect the damage. All 4 tires ruined. Karen. I pulled out my phone and called a tow truck, pacing the driveway while I waited. Anger churned in my chest, but beneath it was something stronger, determination. After a tow truck took my car for repairs, I called a rideshare to the police station, anger building with every mile. At the front desk, Officer Mendez greeted me, his posture straightening as I explained my situation. Strangers were living in my house, renting from a woman named Karen, who had posed as the owner. "She threatened me, and later I found my car tires slashed," I added, placing the deed and forged lease on the desk. Mendez nodded as he reviewed the documents. "Classic rental scam," he said. "We'll investigate and track down Karen. If confirmed, she'll face charges for fraud, trespassing, and vandalism." "How long will this take?" I asked. "We'll move quickly, but file for an emergency eviction to be safe. And be careful. She's already shown she can escalate." When I returned home later that evening, I wasn't sure what to expect. After her vandalism and threats, Karen had proven she wasn't someone to be taken lightly. But when I pulled up to the house, I saw her standing on the front porch, leaning casually against the railing as if she owned the place. Her confident smirk made my stomach churn. I stepped out of the car, ready for another confrontation, but before I could say anything, Karen raised a hand and smiled like we were old friends meeting for coffee. "Let's talk," she said, her voice cool and collected. I climbed the steps, keeping my distance. "We don't have anything to discuss. You're done here." "Am I?" she said, tilting her head. "Look, you're making this a lot messier than it has to be. We could both win if you'd just stop fighting me." I narrowed my eyes. "Win how?" She straightened her posture, smoothing the front of her blazer as if she were preparing for a business meeting. "You've seen what I've built here. This isn't just some petty scam. It's a business. I've got people who trust me, pay rent on time, and keep your house in perfect condition. If you think about it, I've actually improved the place." "You're illegally renting out my property," I snapped. "That's not a business. It's fraud." She waved a hand dismissively. "Semantics. The point is, I've built something valuable here, and I'm offering you a way to benefit from it. Instead of dragging this through the courts and making enemies, why don't we make a deal? We split the rental income. You get your cut without lifting a finger, and I keep running things the way I have been." I stared at her, disbelief coursing through me. "You're serious, aren't you?" She smiled wider, her eyes narrowing with a hint of something darker. "And if I don't have this house," she said slowly, "then no one will. Think about that before you do something stupid." That evening, after another tense day of dealing with legal filings and police updates, the woman who had been renting the house knocked on my door. She looked uneasy, her gaze darting around as if she was afraid someone might be watching. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "We're leaving tomorrow. My parents have a place we can stay. I don't want my family caught up in whatever's going on between you and Karen. I'm sorry, but this is getting too dangerous." I nodded, understanding her fear. "It's for the best. You and your family shouldn't be involved in this mess." She left shortly after, and I was relieved to know they'd be gone before things escalated any further, or so I thought. That evening, after another tense day of dealing with legal filings and police updates, the woman who had been renting the house knocked on my door. She looked uneasy, her gaze darting around as if she was afraid someone might be watching. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "We're leaving tomorrow. My parents have a place we can stay. I don't want my family caught up in whatever's going on between you and Karen. I'm sorry, but this is getting too dangerous." I nodded, understanding her fear. "It's for the best. You and your family shouldn't be involved in this mess." She left shortly after, and I was relieved to know they'd be gone before things escalated any further. Or so I thought. But in the dead of night, I was jolted awake by the sound of breaking glass. The crash echoed through the house, followed by muffled shouts and the unmistakable sound of footsteps running through the yard. I bolted out of bed and rushed to the window. My heart pounded as I saw a group of masked people storming the property. One of them hurled a brick through a downstairs window, shattering it instantly. Another was kicking over the potted plants and lawn furniture that had been neatly arranged on the porch. Someone else was tearing down the string lights that lined the backyard fence. I fumbled for my phone in the chaos, my fingers trembling as I frantically dialed. But before I could even press the call button, someone kicked it right out of my hand. The phone hit the floor with a sickening crack, sliding across the room. I spun around, my breath hitching in my throat. A masked figure loomed behind me, and in that instant, fear crashed over me like a wave. Of course. Karen had the keys. She must have let them in. Before I could react, the person grabbed me, yanking me backward. I struggled, but they were strong. A gloved hand clamped over my mouth, silencing me as I thrashed. Cold metal pressure pressed against the side of my head. A gun. I froze, my heart hammering like it was trying to break free from my chest. The person leaned in close, their voice a cold whisper in my ear. "You should leave this house. Walk away and don't come back. If you move or call anyone tonight, you're dead." The words sent a shiver down my spine, paralyzing me with terror. My breath came in ragged gasps beneath their hand, and I felt the weight of the gun against my skull, each second stretching endlessly. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, they were gone. The masked figure released me, shoving me forward before slipping out through the broken window. I stumbled to my knees, shaking uncontrollably. I heard the faint sound of the getaway car revving its engine and disappearing down the street, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. I crawled toward my phone, but when I picked it up, the screen was shattered and useless. My fingers trembled as I tried to think. Call the police. No, they had warned me. The gun pressed against my head replayed in my mind, the deadly whisper still fresh in my ears. I sat on the floor, my back pressed against the wall, breathing heavily. My body refused to move, paralyzed by fear. I knew calling the police was the right thing to do, but what if they came back before help arrived? What if next time they didn't just threaten me? For the first time in this entire nightmare, I felt completely helpless. I stayed there for what felt like hours, staring at the shattered window, the chaos around me, and the words spray-painted on the garage, "Get out." I sat on the floor, back against the wall, shaking from the encounter. My mind raced, replaying the masked figure's words and the cold weight of the gun pressed against my head. They thought they had all the power. They thought I'd be too scared to do anything. And for a moment, they were right. I was afraid. But what none of us knew was that the police had already decided to act tonight. Officer Mendez had been watching the situation unfold, the police cruiser parked silently a block away. No lights, no sirens, just quiet observation. He had taken my earlier call seriously, and as soon as the first crash echoed from the property, he and his team had arrived, blending into the shadows, tracking the masked attackers as they wreaked havoc. I had no idea they were there until the moment everything shifted. I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching, heavy, controlled. My heart leapt into my throat, but this time it wasn't fear. It was hope. I crawled toward the shattered living room window just as I saw them, officers dressed in tactical gear, moving in perfect synchronization. They crept through the yard, silent but deadly, like shadows in the night. The attackers were still in full chaos mode, completely unaware that the tables had turned. One of them was smashing what was left of the patio furniture, laughing like a maniac, while another sprayed more paint across the garage. The one who had threatened me earlier stood near the porch, scanning the yard for any signs of movement, probably to make sure I wasn't calling for help. Then it happened. "Police, don't move!" The command cut through the night like a gunshot. Flashlights flicked on, beams slicing through the darkness as officers surged forward. Chaos erupted. One of the masked attackers tried to run toward the street, but an officer tackled him to the ground before he could make it past the driveway. Another attacker raised a crowbar, but before he could swing, an officer grabbed his arm and wrestled him down, the crowbar clattering to the pavement. I watched in stunned silence as the police overwhelmed them one by one. The air was filled with the sound of shouting, scuffling, and handcuffs clicking into place. The guy who had kicked the phone out of my hand earlier made a desperate sprint for the backyard, but an officer intercepted him, taking him down with a clean tackle. Within minutes, the yard was a battlefield of fallen attackers, their masks pulled off as officers secured them. I recognized some of their faces from when they had vandalized the house earlier, young, cocky, and full of arrogance. Now they looked terrified. Then my breath caught as I saw one last person trying to slip away, quietly sneaking through the side yard toward the street. Karen. She wasn't wearing a mask, but her face was twisted in panic as she tried to slip past the chaos unnoticed. She didn't get far. An officer spotted her and sprinted toward her, grabbing her by the arm before she could escape. "Let me go!" she screamed, thrashing wildly. "You can't do this! I didn't do anything!" "Karen Adams," the officer said calmly, tightening the cuffs around her wrists. "You're under arrest for property damage, trespassing, vandalism, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Her protests grew louder as they hauled her toward the police cruiser, but her words no longer held power. Her scheme was over. I finally let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and staggered to the front door. An officer approached me, his face a mixture of concern and reassurance. "You're safe now," he said. "We've got them all." I nodded, my body still trembling as I leaned against the doorframe. I looked around at the wreckage, shattered windows, spray-painted walls, broken furniture, and knew it wasn't over yet. There was still cleanup, legal battles, and repairs ahead. But tonight, I had won the first battle. Karen had underestimated me. She thought she could scare me into running, but instead, she was the one being taken away in handcuffs. And as the police car doors slammed shut, I realized that no matter how messy things had gotten, this was the beginning of the end. For her. Thanks for watching. If you've had similar experiences or just want to share your thoughts, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this.